Greetings, one and all, and welcome to an impromptu 1904 club from here at Hull City's training camp in Istanbul. And I've got Fletch with me, a million miles away in somebody's cupboard, probably in Leeds. Where are you?
I'm at home, actually. I'm at home in the spare room, we'll call it, the spare room. So it's an upgrade from the cupboard that I normally find myself in.
Absolutely.
Let's do a quick temperature comparison, Baz, for you in Istanbul. How hot's it over there at the minute?
35.
Okay, there is a difference then. It's cloudy and it's 19 degrees here. So I was going to go in with the point of we've just had a heat wave. You don't need to go out there, but 16 degrees difference is perfectly justifiable.
To be honest with you, I'd quite happily take 17 or 18. I went out for something to eat last night at about 9 o'clock, and it was actually, the temperature was saying it was like 29, but I've got to be honest, it didn't feel that hot. There was a nice steady breeze, but today is absolutely baking. And the players, there's a marked difference actually, Fletch, that when we were here a year ago, they were training twice a day. They were training at 11, I think it was, and then they were training again in the afternoon. So they were basically, the first session of the day under Tim Volta was right in the thick of the heat of the day, and it was unbearable. But 12 months on, they're only training, I say only, they're training once a day, and they tend to train like between 5:30 and 6 for an hour and a half. So as we record this on Thursday, they'll be training. They're training this evening at 6 o'clock. So they'll do all their gym work. They'll do their swimming pool stuff, et cetera, and then they'll go out and do their hour or so of on field training. I think that'll be the same on Friday as they build up towards the game against Kashimpaşa on Saturday night. Similar time, I think, to what we saw against Istanbulspor on Tuesday.
And that'll be the Shota Arveladze derby, won't it? Isn't that what his latest club, his latest venture?
It is. He's back for his second spell, Shota. So I'm looking forward to catching up with Shota. He obviously had his spell at City was disastrous, wasn't it? But I think he was a popular figure. The players thought he was a character. The fans certainly thought he was a character. And yeah, I think, look, given how they played on Tuesday, I think they'll go into it, buoyed and full of confidence, won't they? Because I thought it is. Look, you always have to caveat pre-season by saying it is pre-season. There's a limit to how much you can take from it. But given the fact that a year ago they didn't win a game, they were tonked 4-0 at Doncaster. They were smashed, admittedly heavily, against a very, very good Fenerbahce team in the Saracoğlu Stadium. But the whole narrative of last summer was negative, wasn't it? Because of the poor recruitment, how slow it was, the fact that when we were out here 12 months ago, the squad was bereft of quality, of experience. It was, they filled the numbers on the plane with under 18s, under 21s, and what have you, because there was so few first team senior pros. That isn't the case this year. That they have got a basis of a good squad. Yes, it's not. We don't think it's ready for the Championship in terms of there's still some gaping holes, but there is a different feel about the group compared to what there was 12 months ago. The players seem happier. What they're being asked to do is much more normal. Those that watched the game on Tuesday, and yeah, again, the caveat, it was against the second division team in Turkey, but the manner of the performance, the signs within that performance were really, really positive. And I think we can already see that what Jakirovic is trying to do with the players and the way they're talking is very different to what it was 12 months ago. So I think in the context of the whole football club, and there's a lot of negativity around the club with the finances and the transfer, the fee restriction, which we'll come on to in a little while. Yes, that is a negative, and that's not great. Of course it's not. But if we just strip back and focus on the actual football and the manager, I think that's in a positive place. And I think we should emphasise that point, that the players are buying into what the manager wants, and the manager's he's getting a tune out of them. And that is an exciting part of it. Let's say that.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the footballing side, Baz. I watched the game from the office on Tuesday, ahead of essentially like doing a work from home reporting shift, if you like. And I was really impressed.
That's not bad if you can get it.
And I remember distinctly from the game, watching the first half with Sellers Fleming playing up front. Just the way that they were able to thread the through balls in between the fullback and the centre half, and they just seemed to be getting so much joy from it and creating these opportunities. Now, Sellers Fleming, granted, didn't take his, but he still hit the target. And then it eventually came off in the second half where they scored 2 goals. But it was a noticeable transition, if you like, and a difference from what we've seen under the previous regimes. And when Sergei said in his press conference in the UK about wanting to play, in Turkey, when he wanted to play vertical football, that sounds like he's only fine-tuning what Ruben Sayers had anyway. I think it's fair to say that despite not being necessarily entertaining under Ruben Sayers, it got the job done and it kept them in the Championship. And as you allude to, Baz, you're there, you've got direct contact with players and the staff. And if you can see that there's a good vibe there, they seem to be, as you say, taking on board what Sergei is saying. People were impressed with what he said to the club afterwards as well in his post-match presser pitch side. And, you know, it's emphasising how there's good things and bad things, so he's not getting too carried away. I think it was a good base to build off for pre-season. Like you said, results become irrelevant in pre-season. They get forgotten about very, very quickly. But in the moment, fans, I think, who watch that game will be very happy with what they put out as a first clear dimension, if you like, of what we were able to see. Okay, they lost to Lincoln, lost to Grimsby in behind closed doors matches. But now that we've seen it, I think there's plenty of positives to take going forward and to build on.
Well, their first game was against Lincoln behind closed doors, but they'd only been in training, 5 days. So they lost that. They then beat Grimsby. They beat Grimsby. Sellers Fleming scored the only goal on Saturday before they flew out here on Sunday. And I do tend to agree that, excuse me, I've been a bit under the weather. So if I get a bit like coffee or what have you, I apologise in advance. Yeah, I've been a bit under the weather, but I think, look, it is only pre-season, as I say, and results do get brushed over, but you can't escape. You can't escape that what happened last summer built into the narrative of and it just. I think everybody just got down. I think everybody was worn out before the season even began, and that included Tim Volter. And he was like, "Look, we said that we've done Volter to death, but there's no doubt about it. The guy was let down in terms of the recruitment, and he inherited a weak squad, and that weak squad wasn't, that didn't change. And what with 14, I think, what did we say it was? 14 players were signed after that final game of the summer at Reading, where they lost. And I just think this time around, particularly with everything that's going on away from the football pitch, fans just need something to cling on to. Fans need an element of positivity, and because of the financial situation, that's a real concern for them, and rightly so. And I think if the team had lost a couple of games as well, it would just build into that. Oh, here we go again. But the fact they've won a couple of games, it makes the whole feeling around around Riva on Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening was we've won a game. It's a game against a second tier Turkish team, so let's not get too excited about it. I get all of that, but they've won a football match, and this is a football club that over the last 18 months certainly over the last year, has not won enough football matches, however that looks. And if it is a friendly against a second tier, I keep wanting to say German team. I've got no idea why. If it is against a second tier Turkish team, well, let them out. Let the fans that were there and followed it from around the world, let them have that kind of little bit of enjoyment. And I think part of that enjoyment came from just the way they played. And they played, it wasn't anything spectacular, really. And I think this is where City fans have had to kind of lower their expectations in recent times. But the fact they just played positively, that when the goalkeeper got the ball, he tried to play forward rather than going sideways. When I thought Cody Drame was excellent. When he got the ball, he tried to go forward. He was darting across the pitch. He was trying to make things happen. In that first half, Casey Palmer was really lively, and there were a couple of moments. Yes, he should have made better decisions. There was you touched on earlier on, Fletch, that a chance for Sellers Fleming, but that came from Casey Palmer dummied his man in the middle of the park. He galloped towards the edge of the box, and what he should have really done was probably burst the net. But what he did in the end was play a pass almost too hard for Sellers Fleming, and the angle was quite acute. And he still hit the target. He forced a good save from the goalkeeper's legs. But there was a lot of positivity. Cathal McCarthy was, I thought was a fantastic bright spot as well. He was, I spoke to him the day before. Actually, I did an interview with him, and he's caught my eye in training. And obviously, he's a central defender, but he was played in midfield because there was no Alzati, there was no Gustavo Puerta, and there was one moment in the second half where he received the ball back to goal from Semi Ajayi, and he rolled his man brilliantly in midfield, and he was clear, but he got clipped, and he won a free kick from the referee. And I thought for an 18-year-old playing a senior game for Hull City, albeit in a friendly, I thought he was good. It was fantastic to see Drame link up with Carl Joseph, and for Carl Joseph to get off the mark. I thought Charlie Hughes' ball out to Pharrell Brown for the winning goal. Pharrell's run off the line and the confidence to believe that he could do that. I think there was a lot of positives to take. And as okay, yeah, there will be people who go, it's only pre-season, it's only Istanbul Sport, let's not get too excited. And we're not at all. But what we are doing is saying it was an enjoyable game to watch for the most part, and that City won the game. And within that game, there was some real positive moments and from players that could yet have a real big role to play over the next 9 or 10 months.
Yeah. Should we talk about the fact that obviously it's mid-July, and well, before we come to that, actually, the one big thing out of that game though that's significant is Loui Coyle had to come off after 55 minutes. Is there any indication, Baz, of how serious it is?
As we record, unfortunately, the timing of recording, no. But as I say, I'm at the training ground shortly, so we'll hopefully get an update on that. It didn't look great, did it? I think everybody watching could see that he overstretched for a ball, and he knew straight away something had happened. So fingers crossed for Loui. It's nothing more than a minor hamstring tweak, and he's only going to be out for a little period of time. I mean, any lengthy period of time would be a disaster for him and for City. But it's funny, isn't it? It has a funny way of creating situations and talking points. And obviously Cody Drame has been one of them. He didn't play a huge amount last season. When he did, he was largely deployed on the left, certainly before Ruben came in. And there's been an awful lot of talk about him this summer. There's a great deal of interest in Cody, but Sergei really likes him. So if Loui is going to be out for any period of time, whether that's a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, we'll wait and see in the fullness of time. But it does present an opportunity to Cody Drame, and if he's going to play, then there's a chance that he stays at the football club. If he's not going to play, he'll go, because he doesn't want to be playing second. With respect to Loui Coyle, he doesn't want to be playing second fiddle for the next 46 games to Loui Coyle. He wants to go and play, and I think he's got offers on the table from the likes of Preston, from Derby, from other clubs, where he would go and play, and he would be their first choice right back. There's in football, one man's negative is another man's positive, isn't it? And I think whatever happens to Loui, it does present that chance to Cody Drame. So let's wait and see. But yeah, we'll have an update over the next couple of days on the severity of Louis's injury, and hopefully, as I say, it's not serious and he can get back excuse me, sooner rather than later.
Should we talk about some of the incomings, possible incomings, and some of the possible outgoings as well, before we sort of summarise where we are with what's going on with the EFL appeal and that kind of thing? Alfie Jones to Middlesbrough, £2 million, apparently. What's
Alfie's out here. He was captain for the first half team against Istanbul Sport. But it's no secret. We've obviously reported the other day that Middlesbrough want him. Rob Edwards is a big fan of Alfie Jones. Alfie, I think, is coming into the last year of his contract. So, on the face of it, £2 million for a player of Alfie's quality and also availability as well. We talk a lot about the durability of footballers and how perhaps City sometimes, some of their signings perhaps haven't been available as often as they would like. Alfie's not one of those players. Alfie's a player that's always available, very rarely has injury trouble, and if he does, it's the odd niggle that keeps him out for a game or two. He's always available. So I think, he's look, if he is to move, he's earned it. He was a fantastic addition when he arrived 5 years ago. He was absolutely crucial in getting the club back into the Championship in that League One title-winning campaign. Grant McCann described him as a Rolls-Royce footballer, and I think he's a very, very good defender, and he's been a fantastic servant to the football club. So it's one that I would not be surprised would get done. And then if you look at it, they've got John Egan, and I know there's links there was some links earlier in the week for John to be moved on. I don't feel that is something that would happen. I don't think the club would allow that to happen. Obviously, as Adrian has repeatedly said time and time again, that if a player wants to leave, he wouldn't stand in their way. But I don't get any impression that Egan's pushing for a move. And realistically, I think the first choice partnership, if the season kicked off tomorrow, it would be Egan and Hughes. And you've obviously got Semi Ajayi, who's coming. I thought he looked very, very calm and composed. He's a Nigerian international. Of course, he's a very, very good player and a very, very good free transfer. So, I don't see them going into the season carrying Charlie Hughes, Egan, Sean McLaughlin and Alfie Jones, as well as Semi Ajayi as well. So I feel that if Borough are offering a couple of £1 million, I feel that that's a deal that at some point probably gets done. And if he goes, Alfie, he's been a wonderful player. As you'll know, Fletch, obviously when you were involved in the football club, you would have spoken to him. He's a wonderful guy. He's a great lad to have in the dressing room, and he's been a good servant to the football club. So look, football is transient, and players come and go. Some of them have impact, some of them don't, and I think Alfie is one of those players that's had a fantastic impact at the football club over the last 5 years, and he's earned his move. And if it's to go and play for Borough, then fair play to him. And it will be then interesting to see what happens to Sean McLaughlin, because we know Blackburn are interested. They were a year ago. That was quite close a year ago. That interest, although they've changed managers since, obviously it was John Eustace a year ago. Now it's Valérien Ismail. That interest in Sean McLaughlin hasn't gone anywhere. So can they afford to lose Jones and McLaughlin? I'm not entirely sure, especially given McLaughlin can play at left back and did play at left back the other day.
Well, yeah, I think to pick up on that, Baz, I think that's the only reason really why I think McLaughlin, if he knows that he's going to be very much in the pecking order of playing at left back, because at the minute, last year I said they had an absolute ton of players who played in the central midfield area or could then advance forward into the 10 position. And it feels like it's now the centre halves where there's quite a lot of congestion. We're not talking about a structure where you've got a clear, definitive starting pair and then two players that can come in, hold their own and possibly develop. You've got five there who can effectively put their hand up and say, I think I'm good enough to be a championship centre half. So without dwelling on the financial side too much, if you're going to offload to try and balance in other areas, you can afford for me to get two players off the books in that centre half position. And then if you have, let's say, a young centre half coming through, possibly as an emergency standby who can maybe hold their own on occasion. If, for example, it all goes well in the Championship and they end up having strong leads, you can bring them on, bed them in for 15, 20 minutes. So Jones, for me, if the interest there, as you say, £2 million is a good price for him that's been quoted. For McLaughlin, without wishing to obviously put words in his mouth, I think because of how long he's been here, he's only had one season. I think I've made this point before, where he's only been, I guess, the number one candidate to play centre half. But that's because Jacob Greaves, who was the other left-footed centre half at the time, was the one who was shoehorned into left back. And that's what gave McLaughlin his opportunity to come into the team. And when I've spoken to him before, doing interviews, etc., he comes across extremely pleasant. But as any footballer in any position, they want to be in that starting 11. And I think after being at the club for nearly 6 years, 5.5 years, patience, I think, is going to be wearing thin. And I think he might have in his mind that he might want to. If he knows that he could see there's an opportunity to be a first-team player elsewhere, I wouldn't be surprised if he took it. I hope he stays, but I think that's the impression I'm getting from him from previous conversations a while ago.
Yeah, I think, as you rightly say there, Fledge, you've got, McLaughlin's been at the club a long time, and I think he would feel that given the amount of time he's been at the football club, he has earned the ability to be a first choice starter, and he isn't that, and he certainly isn't going to be this season. I don't feel, because you've got Hughes and John Egan and then Shemi Ajayi. They also, Stan Ashby's out here. They rate him very, very highly as well. So, maybe they feel that with Ajayi, Hughes and John Egan, that's, they've got 3 frontline central defenders, and you've got Ashby as well, that although he's young and inexperienced, that a player that excuse me, could fill in if need be. They might also go back into the market and look to try and bring in, cover there. We'll have to wait a bit like they did with Finn Burns. But I don't think any right-minded City fan would begrudge McLaughlin or Jones going. I know. In terms of Alfie, he's got a year left, and they do have the option of an extra year. But I think, look, in the current financial situation, if Borough are offering a couple of £1 million, and again Alfie will feel that he, at his age, with his experience, that he's a starting Championship defender, not somebody that's going to be on the bench. So I would be surprised if. Sorry, I wouldn't be surprised if either one or both were sold in the coming weeks. And as I say, both have been tremendous players for the football club. The way they carry themselves off the pitch as well, I think that's important to say. So, look, if they are to go, they go with everybody's best wishes, I think.
Got to tip our hat to Grant McCann, the recruitment staff at the time then, because they were both players that were brought in under him. And I think, a lot was, let's be honest, when Hull City went down in 2019-20, before Alfie Jones came in, obviously the vast majority of people want Grant McCann out. But when you think about it, the players that he's actually brought through, given the chance to, and some of the signings that he made, they've actually turned out to blossom on. And as you say, I think most fans would be, to use an analogy, I think would be like happy parents or guardians if they were to leave, because they've done such good things for the football club. Okay, they haven't maybe had the accolades of success from a football team, apart from getting back into the Championship, really to talk about. Okay, got close to the playoffs in one season, but they've been solid, haven't they? They've been solid. They've been trustworthy. 7 out of 10 players, week in, week out. So they will be. But then, as we've talked about, Ajayi, Egan, Charlie Hughes fit that bill as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The other 2 players that we need to talk about as well are Rida Loui and Gustavo Puerta, because obviously, I've not seen. I've got to be honest. I don't know if anybody's watching the video, but there's some artwork behind. There's a guy that just looks the happiest fella. He's pinned on the wall behind me. He's the happiest fella in the world.
He's a bit like you?
Yeah, he's trying to bring positive vibes. He's a bit like my driver out here for the week. He's the happiest guy in the world. Such a nice fella.
Hang on a minute, you've got a driver.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so we don't get any royalties for the podcast, but you get shepherded about in a nice saloon car, Baz. Is that the agreement? Is it that
it seems
that
to
why
be
we've
the case,
never had a piece of paper to sign?
Yeah, quite. So yeah, Puerta didn't feature in the game against Istanbul, and I would be surprised if he features against Kashimpaza. Loui hasn't trained so far. The problem they've got is, obviously, as we know, just to recap for those that don't, Puerta was signed over the Easter weekend. There was an appearance quota, which he hit against Swansea when they lost on Good Friday. So they activated a deal which signed Puerta for about £3 million from Bayer Leverkusen in Germany. Unfortunately, because of the situation with the EFL, that deal has not been approved by the EFL. So technically, as it stands, my understanding is that Puerta remains a Bayer Leverkusen player. And also, Loui, who's arrived from Morocco, the same situation that he is not a Hull City player. So as it stands, they've got a problem. I think part of their hope was that they would be able to flip Puerta this summer and sell him on at a profit, which probably I'm speculating now, but I dare say that any business plan they put forward to the Football League would include selling Alzate and would include selling Puerta. Now, that creates a massive problem for them because although they would have signed Puerta for £3 million and he was signed on an instalment plan, so they wouldn't have paid $3 million up front. It would have been $3 million over the duration of his contract. They would have banked on getting that money in to be able to either pay off debts, pay existing transfer commitments, or strengthen the squad and bring players in. So now that leaves them with a bit of a problem. And ultimately, as it stands, you've got two players in limbo here that thought they were Hull City players and were preparing for a season in the Championship, and at the minute cannot play. Particularly Loui is a more serious one for me because he was signed this summer, but he isn't a whole. He cannot. The EFL aren't going to approve his registration because obviously at the minute they've not got a transfer embargo. The embargoes that were placed on them have been lifted, but they are under a fee restriction. So until we know what the outcome of the appeal is, they cannot sign a player for any money or pay a loan fee. So Loui falls under the situation where they cannot pay a fee, whether it's £400,000 or £300,000 or £1. It matters not. The principle remains the same. So as it stands, Loui, and I guess if a resolution isn't found quickly, he will go off and sign for somebody else. So they've got a problem because those two players have not been signed. The EFL have not approved those registrations, and as it stands, yes, the club may have put statements out to that effect, back at Easter and more recently with Loui. That is essentially not worth the paper it's written on. The contracts have not been approved by the Football League, so they're not Hull City players. They cannot play for Hull City, which is an absolute farcical situation, but one that, that is, as I understand it, where we're at.
And just to add to that, Baz, a credible Colombian journalist put out in the early hours of this morning. This is how it was written in Spanish. Translated, it's Gustavo Puerta is to leave Hull City. The team have an EFL sanction that prevents them from registering new players, which is why he hasn't been involved in friendlies. The Colombian will switch clubs and Hull City, and they are already analysing offers, apparently. But as you say there, Baz, if he's a Bayer Leverkusen player, who does the bargaining? Because is it Hull City that will do that negotiation, or do Bayer Leverkusen then come in and sort it out themselves?
Well, that's the $1 million question that we need an answer to is, and that they're trying to figure out with the Football League because, let's if we look at it in basic terms, let's say that City thought that, Club A had made an offer to City for Puerta for £4 million, right? And they thought they were going to sell him on for £4 million at a profit, £1 million profit, let's say. Well, if that isn't the case now, then that creates a financial hole that wherever that money was going to go, whether it was going to pay off the Louis Barry debt, whether it was going to pay off the Finn Burns debt, whether it's going to pay off existing debts to other football clubs that they've got, City were banking on having that money. Well, now if that isn't the case, yes, they don't need to pay the £3 million to Leverkusen, so you could say that evens itself out. But they need to find a way with the EFL to get around this situation because, their business plan for the summer would have been based around their projections of getting money for Alzate, Puerta, potentially Alfie Jones, maybe Abu Kamara, maybe there's 6 or 7 players that they thought that were within their dressing room that they could sell for money to give them money to pay off their existing football creditors and give them money to then sign other players that they need to sign to strengthen their squad. So it's a mess, frankly. But ultimately, it looks like, as it stands now, neither of those players are going to play for Hull City. But Puerta is there, but it's Loui I feel really sorry for. because he's obviously moved over here very recently to set up a new life. Puerta's spoken openly about his desire to leave Hull City. He spoke about that, during during the last season. In the final weeks of the season, he spoke about wanting to move on this summer. So it's Loui, the one I feel a bit for. I guess more will come out in due course about that. But I would be at this stage amazed if we ever saw either of them play for Hull City.
It's quite a damning situation, that, isn't it? Particularly for Loui, because let's bring it back to away from him being the caveat of him being a football player. If any of us were to get employment in a different continent and all of a sudden you see that position pulled from you, that's devastating, especially for a player of his age. What would you say, Baz, is the overall sort of snapshot that we can give City fans today as what the next step of what we're expecting to hear from the EFL side of things that we haven't already discussed?
So I obviously we had the media conference on Tuesday, which was primarily aimed at Turkish media. There were loads of them there, but I did ask Jared Dublin about the situation, and he pointed out that today, Thursday, would be a date that they would find out more information. That information would be about the next steps. It was never going to be. It isn't going to be about whether the appeal is successful or unsuccessful. So my gut feeling is that they will find out that there will be an appeal hearing at the end of the month, where, obviously the EFL and City will put their cases forward. The EFL, obviously, as we know, have landed them with a 3-window fee restriction. I expect that will get reduced. Now, whether that gets reduced to just the summer window or not remains to be seen. Whether the whole thing is scrapped completely and the EFL instruct to have some kind of, not transfer embargo, but a kind of a business plan focus that every deal for a period of time has to be ratified by them, perhaps that's the way forward. We saw it with Oxford United a year or so ago, where they were given a 3-window fee restriction, very similar punishment. It was reduced to a 1-year fee restriction on appeal, suspended for 2 years. So perhaps that's something that might happen, that it gets suspended. What I would say is this is not going to go away. I don't foresee a situation where, it's scrapped completely and Hull City are told to crack on as normal. I don't believe that is going to happen. I think the EFL have got grave concerns about Hull City's ability to pay their bills, both to suppliers. So whether it be cleaners or IT people or, people that are providing a service to the football club in East Yorkshire, the EFL have got grave concerns about that. But they've also got grave concerns about Hull City's abilities to keep up with their existing transfer debt. We know there's about £20 million of outstanding debts that the City owe to other clubs, whether it be to Blackpool for Carl Joseph, whether it be to Leeds for Cody Drame, whether it be, Real Salt Lake for Matt Crooks. There's obviously Balumi, Miller. They've signed a lot of players in the last 12 months. And because of how deals are structured, a lot of those payments will still be due over the next few months. So the EFL have got massive concerns about City's ability to keep up with those payments, let alone allow them to go and splurge and spend another £10 million on players this summer. So I from what I'm being told, I don't foresee any kind of situation where City are told to, right, all right, lads, crack on as you were. I can't see that being the case. We know they've already put a stop to McBurney. McBurney, his salary demands were I don't want to criticise the player because he's obviously got a value on what he believes is his worth, given the fact he was playing in the Premier League, then he's been playing in La Liga. So Ollie McBurney has got a value on what he thinks his salary is worth, and City at one point were prepared to pay that. The EFL have said, no, you're not paying that. So it could be a situation where the EFL say, right, you can sign players, but there's a salary cap, for example. And I'm just making figures up here, so I don't want people to quote me on this as the gospel. But let's say the EFL say, right, for the next 12 months, you can't sign a player for more than £20,000 a week, which to you and I and everybody listening to this is crackers money. But in the Championship, that's it's very good money, but it's not high end money. City have been paying a lot more than that over the last 2 or 3 years. So that would see a massive come down in terms of what they would be able to pay, and accordingly they would have to lower their sights in terms of the types of players they were bringing in. But what the EFL are trying to do here is protect Hull City moving forward. They don't want Hull City to go out and spend £15 million on players and give £40,000 a week contracts out with this massive concern that they can't afford that isn't sustainable and the club can't afford to pay it. So, yeah, Ajum will say, I can afford to pay it. Ajum will say, I'm funding the club. There's no financial concerns. He said that a million times already. The EFL aren't quite so sure based on what they're seeing from, they obviously see every payment that goes into the club and goes out the club. They see every transfer structure. They have to approve it. So in essence, I believe that the panel will be heard at the end of the month, but we have to wait for that to be confirmed officially, and we'll see. But my gut feeling is that it will get the current punishment as it stands. The 3-window fee restriction will be reduced, but it will be now what that looks like.
I think just to add to what you were saying, really, when it comes to wages and things like that, I knew from a few sources at the time regarding the Louis Barry situation. I was actually shocked at how much he's actually earning whilst at Aston Villa, despite his lack of Premier League experience. So, and we're never going to obviously say how much it is or anything like that. It'd be shocking of us to do so. But when someone like Ajun says they're going to go after 10 signings in the summer, half of those can be boxed off as loans, which sounds simple enough, but it's getting the club obviously to agree if they can't, settle a fee straight away. But I think they need to be smart with these loan signings. There should be players that tick the box of Sergei Kirich, whether, maybe not inexperienced, but are willing to learn. And we've seen a successful model of that previously under previous managers. Delap stands out straight away after a couple of loan spells elsewhere. And it used to work. It worked. If you go all the way back to people like Isaac Hayden had a loan spell, and his career didn't go too badly, did it? He ended up playing in the Premier League. Can you expect, as one of those 10, Baz, can you expect John Joe Shelvey to be coming? Is there anything new in that, or is he still just using it as like training exercises, that sort of thing?
I spoke to the manager about this the other day, and he's still on trial. He's going to have another opportunity on Saturday to plead his case. One of the key things they want is experience, and they also want players, big players, tall players, of which Shelvey is ticks those boxes. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. Shelvey of 3-4 years ago is a no-brainer, but obviously he wouldn't have been on trial at Hull City with respect. So there's a reason he's here, but possibly. Coming back to what you've just said there, you made a good point about being frugal. What they can't do, as it stands now, they can't go to Villa and say, we want to sign player X and here's £500,000 loan fee. They can't do that. And there will be a lot of clubs in the Championship that can do that, and that they will now, fall well down the pecking order potentially when it comes to some targets, because they're not in a position to pay more than anybody else. What they've now got to do is they've got to get players that they're going to come for the right reasons, and that fits their model. If the appeal goes, I think the appeal is a bit of a mask. To be fair, I think it's the club and the Football League are quite happy to use the umbrella term in appeal. I think moreover, it's a case of both the Football League and the club finding a way forward that suits everybody. The EFL don't want to ban City from signing players for three windows. That isn't what they want to do. But they also want to protect the football club moving forward, and they don't want a situation where the club goes into administration and has got a real problem. So I think the appeal is, like I say, I think it's a term that's just being used because it's convenient, but I think it's more to do with the fact that both parties will try and find a way of working together. So City get to sign players, but the EFL are happy that they're not going to break the bank. So, yeah, Shelvey we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. I still think they've got the basis of a decent squad. I think, yes, it's a squad that is weaker than it was last season in terms of they've lost, 6 goals in João Pedro and 5 goals in Joe Gelhardt. But they've also got a manager. I feel that the system that he plays is going to get the best out of Carl Joseph. We'll have to wait and see. But Miller and Bellumi aren't ready yet, and they're still a little way away from being fit to play. But having those two back are going to be huge. Obviously, Elliot Matazo is probably not going to be back until Christmas. They might be able to swindle a way of getting in of Zambrano, but again, he's not available until at least November. Matija Frigan, the striker, it looks like we're getting towards the end game of that one, of him coming in on loan. I still think they're going to be in a decent spot, and it's up to, I think the manager's got a massive role to play in whatever happens with this quote unquote appeal. The manager's got his head screwed on. He seems genuinely like a decent bloke, and one that's got the ability to get the best out of the squad he's got. And let's not forget, they've still got a good squad there. Yes, it needs an awful lot of work, but there's some very, very good players in that. Let's look at Drame. Let's look at Charlie Hughes. Let's look at John Egan, Ajay. If you can get the best out of Ryan Giles, there was one. Yeah, okay, he didn't cover himself in glory for the goal, but there was one run when he got the ball in the left back area and basically marauded all the way forward to the edge of the box and got a shot away with what was blocked. That was peak Ryan Giles. There's a £4 million player there that if they can find a way of getting the best out of him, there's a good player in there. Yes, the midfield needs a bit of work depending on what happens with Alzate, but I still feel they'll strengthen. Can you get the best out of Kamara, assuming that he doesn't move on? I know there's interest from Portsmouth and Rangers, but can you get the best out of Kamara? Can you find a way to get him play with his face and his head going forwards as opposed to turning back all the time? Miller and Bellumi, can you get them back fit? Can you get the best out of Carl Joseph? They have got some talent in that dressing room. They spent an awful lot of money 12 months ago. So you've got to have a bit of belief in the manager being able to get the best out of what he's got at his disposal, and with some clever work in the market, be that loans or free transfers, and trying to be creative. All is not lost yet. Let's not write it off as this is going to be a disastrous season and they're going to get relegated, and let's write the obits before the ball's been kicked. I still think they're in. I'd take Hull City now under Jakirovic as compared to Hull City 12 months ago under Volta.
Yeah, and I think we'll see, won't we, over pre-season when we see more tactical tweaks, etc. I think in summary, that we said right at the start, Baz, there seems to be a good base there, even though they don't look as strong as they were at the moment up front regarding the injuries, etc. But what they're using at the moment seems to be doing well. Freegan and the others we'll touch upon probably when we get more clarity, but because it's so complicated, isn't it, with what's going on? But at least the wheels are spinning and they are still behaving in a way that they think they're confident, and that if they're going to bring in 10 signings, they're still doing the work to try and make that happen. So,
well, they've got to,
won't it? At the end, and I think if they get what they want, I think there'll be a big swing towards a more positive outlook going into the season. Because let's be honest, we've been incredibly negative because of what we think is going to happen in previous weeks. But if there is light at the end of the tunnel with what's going on with this, then Hull City crack on into the next season.
Yeah, I think, look, financially, there's obviously massive concerns, and that needs to right itself. The club have got to get themselves on a footing where, and be transparent about it. Obviously, I spoke to Adjun down in London back in May, and he talked about bringing outside investment in. Is that feasible? We now know that the club have had cash flow problems. That hasn't solved itself yet. There's still outstanding payments that need to be sorted out. Fundamental to this is proven to the Football League that they can be sustainable, that they can pay their bills, essentially, that they can pay their way. Now that's something that they've got to prove on a day-to-day basis, and let's hope that they can. I think what would make everybody feel a little bit better is a new signing, particularly in the top third. If they can get Freegan over the line and get him in, then that just lifts everybody. The players, obviously the dressing room is the most important thing, because the players are the ones that are going out and performing. But if you bring a Freegan in, suddenly they've got another option up front. It lifts the crowd as well. The crowd are feeling a little bit better about things. It helps the manager. The manager's talking to players. He told me this the other day. He's talking to players, but there are players that are going to have reservations, because they're going to have reservations about joining Hull City because of the situation off the field. Is it a good club to come to? Yes, I want to play for the manager. Yes, it's a great club. Yes, the fans are great. It's a great stadium. There's a lot about Hull City that is very, very attractive. But the caveat is, well, if they're going to be if they're not going to have to sign anybody else for 3 windows, or they can't do this or they can't do that, is that a club I want to join? Because what's the long-term outlook? Is what's the situation with the finances? Am I going to get paid? All these sorts of questions that players are going to be asking. They're going to be asking their agent. They're going to be asking other players, the players that are in the dressing room right now. We knew that Matt Crooks and Egan were playing a big part in trying to get McBurney. Players have got to play their part, hopefully, in trying to convince other players that actually City is a club to come and play for. Yes, there's some issues, but they'll be resolved, and it's up to the owner to make sure those issues are resolved. And if he hasn't got the people in place to make sure that everything's dealt with, we'll sort that out. If he has got the people in place, we'll give them the finances to make sure that bills are paid on time, and you're not having to renegotiate at the 11th hour, or you've got people knocking on your door at the stadium demanding money, because that's not a place that any football club should be, particularly one of Hull City's stature in the Championship, because that's embarrassing and it's not the way it should be. That's not how you run a football club. So they've got to iron out these issues, because ultimately it only hurts the team on the pitch, and that they're already behind the 8 ball. They've already missed out on targets. There was one player they wanted that's moved this week. He's gone for like Jack in terms of a transfer fee, but they obviously have missed out on him because they're in the situation they are. They can't pay a transfer fee. Well, that's embarrassing. And whoever you blame, whether you blame the owner, you blame the EFL or whatever, ultimately they've got themselves in this situation, and they're missing out on very, very good players right now because of the situation they're in. Whoever's fault that is, and everybody will have an opinion on whose fault it is. And that's, and I feel for the manager, because the manager was brought here under the pretense of having a good squad, being able to strengthen and challenge. And he's got, he can't do that right now. And so they need it resolved quickly. They've got to get it resolved quickly, and find a way forward, because they're only going to hurt themselves if this drags on any longer.
I think that's a good place to leave it, isn't it, Baz? Because you're getting yourself hydrated already there. For those who aren't watching, you're going to get your boots on and get on the training pitch. Yeah,
although Carl Joseph did score, so he's taking the pressure off me a little bit. I'm going to be speaking to us. Actually, we've got to keep an eye out. We've got an interview in the bag with Liam Miller, so that'll be going out at some point in the near future. We're going to be speaking to Carl Joseph, Casey Palmer as well, who I thought this is a big season for Kyle. So, for Casey as well as Kyle. So we've got plenty more stuff coming from inside the City training camp out here in Istanbul. So yeah, that's it from the 1904 Club. Fletch, thanks for keeping me company over the last 50 minutes or so. And I better go and get my glad rags on and get myself to training.
No worries. Just remember to keep some space in the duty free for all the goodies, when you're going to bring them back,
Yeah, us. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Cheers, all right. Thanks, Fletch, and thanks everybody for watching. Keep getting in touch at the 1904 Club on Twitter, and we'll be back again very soon. Up those Tigers.